right, welcome everybody. I'm Lucian Fogoros. I'm the co-founder of IoT World. I want to thank you for joining us. There's a lot of events happening this week. I'm actually at ARC Market Research, so I'm broadcasting from Orlando. So we appreciate it. There's probably 4 events that I could have gone to. And I appreciate your time being here with us today. Over several thousand people from 80 countries joined us today. I want to thank you for joining us. So I also want to thank the speakers for taking time to be with us. I want to take the time to also acknowledge the sponsors for supporting us: Hitachi Ventura, HiveMQ, Fortinet, Schneider Electric, Siemens, Trend Micro, and Ursalia. Before we go into it, I want to tell you a little bit about IoT World. We are a digital media outlet, woman-owned, I should say, focused on industrial IoT. Roughly a community about 294,000 people. We focus on delivering daily insights on industrial IoT across multiple verticals, energy being one of them. We have a series of virtual events that we draw thousands of delegates. We're looking forward to the active participation. Again, we have live speakers, live subject matter experts. So make sure you post your question in the Q&A. As a way to say thank you, we're giving away several books by the author himself, by Daniel Izalde, the B2B Innovators Map. We're also giving away several tickets to the IoT VIP community. So for those of you that are familiar with that, it's a community where we also invite the speakers, and we may have options for you to join on a in-person event where we may have a partnership and so on. We also make all the recordings available there. Now that we have the housekeeping out of the way, I'd like to introduce the topic and the keynote there. So how climate tech companies can accelerate innovation, reduce waste, and avoid costly mistake. Now, Daniel Izalde has been here. Most of you know him. He's a product advisor, helping climate tech product tech teams accelerate their product time to market. So he's also a teacher or instructor at Stanford University. He has trained over 1,500 product professionals around the world on how to take ideas to market. Welcome, Daniel. Your floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Lucian. It's a pleasure being here. Good morning or good evening, everybody. Let's get started. Today I'm going to talk about how to accelerate innovation, specifically for climate tech companies, which is the work that I do. And so I want to start with this quote that probably, if you're in the energy world, you're familiar with. We hear this from pundits and from books and articles, etc., that we need to accelerate innovation to reach net zero emissions by 2050. So probably you're familiar with something like this, but in working with hundreds of companies that are working in innovative climate tech technologies, a lot of them struggle to define what does accelerate innovation really mean, and therefore they struggle with that part. And we need to advance this a lot faster if we are hoping to get to this net zero goals by 2050. So in this presentation, I'm going to share with you a process that I use with these companies to help them accelerate that innovation, and hopefully you will find it useful in your own innovation path. So next, please. So the main thing that I want to share is that accelerating innovation is not accelerating product development or accelerating sales. Most of the companies that I talk to think that, well, it's a matter of putting more developers into building their solutions so that you can build more product faster. Or if you just put a lot more salespeople into your team and to try to push it through the market, then your innovation will take root. But that is never the case. In fact, there's a lot of studies that show that the majority of B2B innovation products fail. And they fail within the first year, and they rarely get to achieve first 10 customers. So it's a very dim number. So what happens when you accelerate product development or accelerate sales is that you are building on an unstable foundation. The main concern or the main complaint from these companies when they find out what happened and their product failed is that they built something that the market didn't want. They built something that customers didn't need or did not meet the specific requirements. So therefore, nobody buys it. So as you can see in this picture, the foundation of building customer-centric products it's lacking in a lot of the B2B world, and particularly in a lot of the energy industry and the climate tech companies that I work with. So what is the path forward then? So let me share this approach that I use, and we can discuss it more in the Q&A. So next, please. So accelerating innovation, as I said, it's not accelerating development. Accelerating innovation means reducing the time and risk between the idea and creating customer value. So if I were to put that in a different way, accelerating innovation means making less mistakes. So it's not about moving faster. It's about moving in a more predictive way, taking smaller steps, but those are grounded in customer evidence. And so if you are making those customer evidence steps, then you'll be able to reach your destination a lot faster than if you just move forward with your whole development process, build something, put it out in the market, see if it sticks, start all over again. So again, the whole idea of accelerator innovation is reducing time and risk between idea and customer value. So how do you actually do it? So let me share the approach I use. Next, please. So in my upcoming book, The B2B Innovators Map, I define the first 6 stages of the innovation journey. And every B2B enterprise IoT type of product needs to go through these 6 stages. And these stages are strategic alignment, market discovery, user discovery, solution planning, prototyping, and early adopter. Now, when I talk to most companies, they usually start directly in the prototyping stage or in the early adopter stage. That's because most companies are either engineering-led or sales-led, and therefore they just want to build something. They are excited about IoT or about AI or ML, and they just want to try something out and see who wants to buy it. But as I mentioned before, this often leads to failed products and wasting millions and millions of dollars. So notice that this flow, it's not linear. So you have this arrows forward and these arrows backwards. What that means is that the goal is to start in one of the stages, say strategic alignment, and then to move to market discovery, you need to meet certain criteria. And if you don't meet it, you go back and spend time on the strategic alignment stage and so on, right? So you can iterate as long as you need in each particular stage before you advance to the next one. And it is possible that you go back stages if needed. And that's how you accelerate innovation. So next, please. Now, I divided this, this framework into 2 parts. You can see the first 3 portions of the framework are focused on understanding your customer problem. So strategic alignment, market discovery, and user discovery, they all go down to customer centricity, figuring out what are the needs of your customer. So then you can move into the next 3 stages to design, build, and test a solution that meets those needs. So it's iterating between the problem space and the solution space in a very structured way. So let me walk you through each of those stages with an example. So next, please. So we need to start in the strategic alignment stage. In here, the goal is to get the alignment with your executive team that the innovation you're going to pursue is aligned with what the company is willing to support. I talked to a lot of executives in the same company, and they all have different reasons of why they want to build this product or what customer problem they're trying to solve. So as somebody that is responsible for driving these products to market, it is very important to get that strategic alignment. Something as simple as we want to help our commercial customers reduce their energy bill. That's enough of an alignment for you to continue to the next stages, right? You don't need to understand at this point who are those customers and what are the exact problems and what's the solution. All you want is for your executive team to say, we are willing to go explore this problem. And if there is an opportunity there, then we can actually invest more in building a product. So once you have that alignment, you can move to the next stage. Next, please. The market discovery stage. Here is where you take all your universe of options and you start discovering who has this problem and what are the specific needs. So let's say that you are focused on reducing the cost of the energy bills of buildings. Well, which buildings? Is it airports? Is it commercial malls? Is it skyscrapers? Is it schools? And then who in that particular environment has the problem and has the budget to do that? What geography? Are you going to be targeting the US or Japan or the Middle East? What are the use cases that you're going to tackle? So by getting together with your team, studying the market, and in the book, of course, I have a lot of specific techniques on how to do that. But the goal here is to narrow down your focus so that you can aim to solve a very, very specific problem for a very specific group of people. Once you have an idea of the market you want to explore, you can go into the user discovery stage. In here, your goal is to understand the users of your product. Who are they and what problems do they have? So for example, you can discover during market discovery that for your reducing the energy bill problem, it is the director of operations of, let's say, warehouses that has the problem of reducing their energy bill. Well, when you install a solution, who is actually going to be interacting with that solution? It could be the people that install the hardware or the IoT solution. It could be the IT department. It could be somebody in accounting that is driving the cost. Could be that you're going to participate on some demand response events with your system. So therefore, it's the utility operators. So understanding everybody that touches your system is going to help you design a better solution, and it's going to help you discover where the profitable opportunities lie. So once you have an idea of your user ecosystem, including their pains, then you can move into solution planning. So at this point, you notice we've gone through the first 3 stages. So we have a good idea of what we lost the screen. So you have a good idea of what the problems of your customers are, but then now you're going to focus on what can you build for that audience. So in the solution planning stage, it's all about working with your team to figure out what product, technology, offering, packaging you can provide to solve that problem. The fact that you understand that problem of your customer doesn't mean that whatever you put out is going to resonate with them. And so here is where you start talking about, well, to reduce the energy bill of our customers, do we need IoT? What kind of sensors do we need? What kind of hardware do we need? What kind of software applications do we need? How does this going to look? Who are our users? Do we need portals? Do we need APIs, etc.? So this is where you plan what that technical solution could be and come up with a lot of assumptions that you're going to test. And that's when you go to the prototyping stage. In the prototyping stage, your role, next please. In the prototyping stage, your role is to test out all the assumptions that you have on whether your potential solution can meet the needs of your customer. And what you're really aiming for is, are you finding desirability, feasibility, and viability? What that means is your solution desired by your target market? Is your solution viable? Can you actually make a profit out of delivering this solution? And then, is it feasible? Can you actually build it? Is the technology robust enough? Does your company have the skills to do it? And then in the prototyping stage, you will go through a series of low fidelity prototypes, starting with sketches, putting it in front of customers, and then evolving it to more complex prototypes until you actually start building your product, software, and hardware. And then eventually you have something that is stable enough and has so much value that your first customer is willing to pay for it. And so that's when you move to the early adopter stage. In the early adopter stage, here is something that we in the energy industry face a lot, which is pilot programs. Every customer is going to want to pilot your solution because it's new, it's untested in the market. So in this stage, the goal is to work with your first 10 customers to go through successful pilots and figure out what works, what doesn't work, and polish all the different things that you need to deliver on that value. The key here is that once you work with about 10 customers, you probably are going to see all the hiccups and everything that's going to go wrong in the installation, in the deployment, in the onboarding, in the operation stages. And so by this stage, you have a good idea of whether you can deliver the value that you promise. So if you're able to deliver value to your first 10 customers, then at that point, you can have a very customer-driven conversation with your executive team and saying, we know we have customer traction, that our solution has potential in the market. Then we can continue to invest, whether it's at that point, more development, more sales, and start inching towards scale. So in summary, if you go through this process, iterating back and forth, even though it seems that there's a lot of steps, these steps need to happen anyway. And all you're doing is accelerating the pace in which you can find that customer need and you can build a solution that truly meets that need so that you can accelerate the innovation and the time to market of your product. Next, please. And that's it. Thank you so much. We are open for Q&A. You can stay in touch with me if you want to talk more about these topics. I'll be happy to do so. There's my email. And also, as Lucian said, we're going to give some giveaways of my upcoming book, but you can also download a chapter 1 of the book for free at b2binnovator.com. So I look forward to hearing from you.
All right. Thank you, Daniel. Very insightful. I was out at the Hanover Messe last week, and a lot of talk on sustainability, and having a framework like you're discussing, it's very timely. Particularly, a lot of people make the claims like you've had in the first stage, you know, by 2050, going to be carbon neutral, but how do you measure some of the things? And so a lot of people are putting things in place and come with good engineering solutions to do that. Having said that, maybe one question I want to start off. So I want to remind the audience, okay, post your question in the Q&A. Everybody that posts relevant question at the end of the day, so around 3:30 today, we're going to call out a few people for the book, but also for the VIP community, which we're waiving the $1,000 fee for joining that, for those people that are active and post questions in the Q&A. So I want to start out with a question around maybe how do you apply this framework if you already start development or have a few initial customers, and you're not starting from scratch?
Yeah, that's a good question, Lucian. Most of the companies that I work with are not starting from scratch, right? It's rare that you have a company that is in the whiteboard stage. And so what I do is I use this framework as a way to assess the health of their innovation process so that we can avoid expensive mistakes later on. So let's say that they already have some sort of prototype. I like to work with these teams and say, okay, let's go backwards. Do you have a strategic alignment? And this is what it means. Do you have a clear target market that you're going to follow? Let's go into that. Do you have a clear user ecosystem that you understand their needs, and so on? And so usually by going backwards, you can poke a lot of holes and you can adjust the direction on what is it that you need to be doing moving forward. And going through that process usually slows down the speed of development, but actually helps you once you go back to the development stage to accelerate, to make sure that you're actually going to get there faster.
Thanks for the insights. Now, I want to go on and poke get some of the questions from the Q&A. So Yusuf Sani is asking, are the slides available after presentation? And yes, with Daniel's permission, we will make those available.
Yes.
So you have them. Also, the recording will be available via email in the next 48 to 72 hours. The question came from Keith Bello. How do you go about managing privacy, data privacy on an IoT product, especially when incorporating blockchain technology?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, right? So the way I describe this, if we go back to the framework, when you're doing solution planning, it's important to bring in a lot of these aspects that are a little bit less tangible: ethics, sustainability, privacy, cybersecurity. And so you have to work with your team to identify what are some of the risks for your company and for your potential customer, and then make sure that you incorporate those early on in your life cycle as you develop. In the book, I actually have clear examples on privacy, specifically on how do you manage that, and how do you set the expectations with your company and with your customers. It's very, very important to start thinking about those very early on. Otherwise, it's really hard to backpedal.
Thanks, Daniel. And a question from Harry Lexman. How can you use the strategic alignment can be adopted for an edutech company?
For a what, sorry?
Edutech, so I guess an
education. Yeah, same idea, right? The strategic alignment really just asks the question, what is the customer outcome that we as a company are looking to explore, right? So what is the outcome that we want to generate for our customers? And so by asking those type of questions of your leadership team, whether it's climate tech, edutech, fintech, it doesn't matter, right? It's about putting those questions and figuring out, okay, what do we want to get out? What strategic direction we want to go? And then you can start the innovation process from there. So the process is the same. And in the book, actually, the book is not energy focused only. It has a lot of examples from 20 years of my experience as in leadership roles in telco, in automotive, in energy, in e-commerce, in finance. So you'll find a lot of those. It's the same applies.
Thank you. And that's probably along the line, the same one. How do you apply this framework with procurement and contract management? So somebody like Diamond Fiancan in the audience is a procurement financial, currently working on research and framework for solving procurement challenges.
Yeah, so the framework is focused specifically on building digital solutions. But oftentimes in B2B, you have certain levels of software, hardware, and then process. And so, if you can apply the same ideas throughout your whole procurement process, because you need to understand the problem you're going to solve. You need to understand what market you're targeting. You need to understand what users and stakeholders are going to be involved in it. And then you need to build a solution, whether it's a product or a service.
Thank you for that. Now a question again from Yusuf Sani is like, would you like to, what if you like to upgrade on a particular project? How would you go about it?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? Because this approach that I have, the whole idea is to be more customer centric. And so even if you want to just upgrade, you're not starting from scratch. The upgrade, you can think about a new innovation project. And so this upgrade needs to have strategic alignment with your company, needs to understand what problems you're going to solve, needs to understand what users are going to be involved. And your solution needs to be desirable, viable, and feasible. And probably you're going to have to pilot it out with new customers. So the same thing applies.
Right. So Hongwei is asking about if you can comment on decarbonization innovation. Not sure if you have any insights there.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I focus on mostly. And so the reality is that decarbonization has a lot of different areas, right? Because anything that you do with smart grid and EVs and carbon capture and energy storage and renewable integration to the grid, they're all towards decarbonization. So if you break down all of those, each one of those has a portion that it is a digital solution or has a digital solution component. And so this approach would help companies building those solutions make less mistakes and get to market faster. And the more companies that we can help to get to market faster, then the more we are contributing towards the global decarbonization.
So Ross Grandi is making a comment that this all sounds good in theory. North America, for the most part, is on side. What about the major polluters? How do you convince them to innovate?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Believe it or not, I actually talked to a lot of utilities and a lot of the oil and gas companies. They're really interested in inching and building projects. They can't be left behind, right? So it's the problem of overarching solving decarbonization is huge, and it involves policy and a lot of different things, right? But on the areas that I'm involved, which is climate tech, which is building digital solutions to help with these problems, even the big polluters are investing a lot of money. Like Shell has a really powerful platform for integrating renewable energy. A lot of the events in energy that you see are sponsored by Chevron or by Shell or by BP. So they are involved, and they're trying. they're not going to flip their business model immediately, but I see that a lot happening.
Yeah, so somebody commented here, says I've used the principal ideation sessions for business discussion. How do you ensure the top 2 to 3 ideas get field tested before making a final decision? This question came from Rashid Hemani.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So if you look at the diagram of the B2B innovators map, the way I address that is you go through market discovery, user discovery, and that's where a lot of those ideas come from. Then you go into solution planning, and at that point you still haven't built anything. And so you start going into field testing when you start doing prototypes, and you can start very small. Like I said, with sketches in the book, I have an example of how we're able to close a deal with a utility for a virtual power plant triggering system through energy storage, with paper sketches and some diagrams to show the concept, and they bought into the idea, and then we took it from there. So it is possible. You don't have to build the whole thing to just to show it to a potential customer and say, would you buy this, right? That's where the waste happens. You can do that by doing some of the early research and then testing it quickly through prototypes. And I talk a lot about how to do that in the book. That's how you would ideate before building anything. It's a great question.
Another question from Amit Lond. He's saying, for B2B collaboration alignment, how challenging is the IP ownership? What are some of the best practices you suggest? That's
a really, really good question. And it is very difficult, right? So one of the things that I advocate very strongly when you go into the early adopter stage, which is when you're going to pilot, this is where you have to have the support of your company, legal, and procurement, compliance, because before you do that first pilot, you have to have a lot of clarity of who owns the IP, what are they paying for, what is custom versus what is your product. So the best practice is really to discuss with your team very early, put it in paper with legal, and as you start going with your first customers, have something that you can say, yes, we're going to do this pilot and it's a test and we're early in development, but our IP starts here, ends here, and this is how we're going to work, right? Some companies in pilots, they want to have a bigger ownership and they might negotiate that. But that's why if you go back to strategic alignment, your executive team has to be able to support you all the way. And so at that point, they should be able to put you in touch with the legal department and their compliance department to do those negotiations, right? So it's super, super important to bring it up very, very early and put it on paper.
Right, we got time for just one question before we have to wrap it up, and we'll answer all the questions offline after this. But one question is like from Dishan Kande, how do companies innovate in an unconstrained manner while having focus on near-term roadmaps and operational execution? When companies sign up for bold climate action, they're hesitant to fail. Any comments on that?
Yeah, so I think there's two questions. I think that I agree, and this is the what I don't know if you heard the book, The Innovator's Dilemma, right? When companies are successful, they could be a victim of their own success because they are not really willing to innovate because they're doing just fine on this path, but that path it will eventually end. And so the companies that I've seen that are more innovative are the ones that are willing to invest in an innovation group that it's separate from the short-term P&L, and that innovation group has different goals, different targets, different metrics, and so it can actually work together to build what's going to fuel the company in the future. And again, that's where the strategic alignment comes in, because the agreement needs to be that if this innovation group finds something that has potential, then the leadership team commits to putting it into the operational side of the house and actually commercialize it, right? So you have to have those parts because they live in very different worlds. So you have to have the day-to-day operations short-term and the innovation arm separately. And what I talked about today focuses more on the innovation side. But great question. Those are the realities of doing innovation, right, in the real world.
Thank you, Daniel, and thank you everybody for joining. We were at the end of this session, so we need to move on to the next session, which is around net zero and industrial world. Appreciate your time and look forward to an exciting day ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody.